Hey, this is Chad Judice, and you're listening to The Art of Suffering. Our mess becomes God's message. In the Gospel of St. Mark, the evangelist is communicating divine revelation to a non-Jewish, first-century pagan audience in ancient Rome that respected two very distinct and powerful things: the exercise of power and authority, which this audience would have understood and taken full notice of. The apostles, at Christ's command, are sent out to preach the gospel, heal the sick, and cast out demons. They encounter a young boy who has been plagued by possession for most of his life, and they are unable to cure him. Confounded by this impediment, they call upon Jesus for help. He says to them and the crowd of witnesses, "O faithless generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I endure you? Bring him to me." Once the boy was in Christ's presence, the boy's father pleaded on his behalf to Jesus, asking him to heal him. And he inquired, "If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help him." Jesus, being perplexed, replied, "If you can, everything is possible to the one who has faith." The boy's father replied, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." Jesus, exercising supreme authority and power, cured the young boy of all his affliction. Later, his disciples asked why they were unable to heal him. And Jesus said to them, "This kind of affliction can only be defeated and come out through fasting and prayer." In June and again in November of 2019, Bishop Robert Barron, chairman of the Committee of the Evangelization and Catechesis of the United States Conference for Catholic Bishops, shared some staggering statistics accumulated through several studies concerning the viability of retaining future generations of Catholics in the Church in the United States. Look, 50% of people who are young today have left the Church and joined the ranks of the religiously unaffiliated. 1 out of every 6 Americans is a former Catholic. For every 1 person brought into the Roman Catholic Church, each year there are 6 who leave. And they're making the intellectual decision to do this at the age of 13. But it's manifesting itself physically as a reality at the age of 23. And they're doing it at the rate of 76%. After being appointed as the Director of Catechetics for the Diocese of Lafayette, and making the connection between these statistics and the lack of retention rates in parish catechesis that are the result of 2 common misconceptions: that faith and science are not compatible, and that people can't reconcile suffering with an all-loving God, I discovered a convincing free resource that provides a satisfactory answer to these pressing questions. Through science-based apologetics, produced by Father Robert Spitzer and his organization called Credible Catholic. I've been blessed to have had an opportunity to develop an ongoing relationship with someone who knows all too well the narrative of this modern generation's difficulty with these perplexed questions, as well as the consequences the wrong answers to them can have on somebody's life and their personal story. Today, I'm here with an amazing person who died with Christ in baptism in order to rise again with him in new life, and whose journey, shared for the first time today, very much mirrors that of the transformation of Saul of Tarsus, who became St. Paul the Apostle, and boldly proclaimed in his letter to the Galatians, "I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." She has overcome a myriad of afflictions, misconceptions, and personal struggles with eating disorder, suicidal thoughts, depression, and forms of bullying. However, these events created a yearning deep within her to find a meaning in life that started a journey through various Eastern religions, ancient philosophies, New Age spirituality, and Christian denominations, earnestly seeking the fullness of truth, which ironically led her back to the very place she first walked away from, the Catholic Church. Ashley Sheridan Fox is an educator, an author, a media producer in higher education and administration, with a demonstrated history of working for the Catholic Church in parish, collegiate, diocesan, and national capacities. She is the former Director of Religious Education and Safe Environment Awareness and Certification for the Diocese of Venice, Florida, and now is the Southwest U.S. Regional Director for the Magis Center for Faith and Reason and Credible Catholic. She specializes in parent and family catechesis, interculturalism, interfaith dialogue, project management, in product development and holds a master's degree in theology with a specialization in catechetics from Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. And today, she resides on a beachfront property in Southwest Florida. Ashley, welcome to the program, and thanks for being here today.
Chad, thank you so much for having me. Honored to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here. And as I think back to how you and I met, I was working with another person with Incredible Catholic, and then you got appointed to this position that oversees the region of the country where I'm located. And we started exchanging emails. And I got really excited by looking at all the great resources that were offered there for people in my diocese to work with people in parishes and schools. And I invited you in to come to Lafayette a couple of times to give a presentation with me about those resources. And when you and I had a chance to visit prior to that presentation, you shared a piece of your story with me. And then as I was preparing to bring you in for this discussion, I gave you a list of questions and you gave me a stirring testimony about some things I really didn't know about. So, I guess the first thing that stuck out with me when I read it was that part of your story is kind of linked to that line today where you hear, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not really religious. And as I was reading through your testimony, you got a lot more to share than I've got time to do today. But could you walk us through your journey away from Catholicism and especially the unique cross you indirectly brought upon yourself and had to overcome when you first left the Catholic Church before you made your way back?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I grew up with a fascination towards magic for whatever reason when I was young. And I played with Ouija in middle school. Later, I would discover that I invited the demonic into my body at the young age of 12. For the next 13 years, I really struggled with a lot of difficulties and also was just trying to figure out what is the truth of life, right? So in 8th grade, I, like you had said, struggled with bullying. I often would eat my lunch in the bathroom stall. I had suicidal thoughts and depression and developed an eating disorder. In high school, I just thought, gosh, there has to be more to life than this. And that's when I dove into that search for truth, right? I started with Eastern religions, so Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, science of spirituality, which is an Indian-based religion. I even dove into the ancient philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then New Age spiritualities, as well as a plethora of Christian denominations, Southern Baptist, Episcopalian, Assemblies of God, non-denominational, and All Souls, the list goes on. But it got worse in college in my young adult life. What happened is the eating disorder just continued to develop. I became obese and continued with suicidal thoughts, a severe year of depression, and at that time developed insomnia, pretty bad form of it. I also, unfortunately, got involved in gang activities, became a victim of rape, ended up becoming homeless and failing out of college. So I just really found myself in one dangerous situation after the other. However, there were these moments of light, like that would pierce the darkness, and it would happen periodically, but it was almost like that light was trying to remind me that it was there.
Kind of like Jesus is the light of the world, and he never really left you. He kind of stood there waiting for you to come back to him at the right point in your life.
Yeah, that, or even like, for instance, there was this one time where I technically almost got kidnapped in the Bahamas. I was in the Bahamas and I was with these Bohemian men and I was hiding underneath the seats in the car. And they told me if I showed my face, then I wouldn't return home. We were in a section of town where that was just the case. And I was not spiritual or religious at the time. And for whatever reason, the Hail Mary prayer popped in my mind. And I didn't even know I knew it, but I just recited it over and over again. And to be honest, I have no idea how I got back to a safe part of town that night, but I did, and returned to the United States a couple days later. So it was moments like this where it was like the light pierced the darkness and reminded me it was there.
Oh, that's definitely some divine intervention. It seems like Our Lady had her hand over you, and she was pulling you back into the fold of the ark of and the bark of St. Peter for sure. As I was reading through your testimony, I remember you talking about the incident in the Bahamas. And then after that, it seemed like you got to a point where you still weren't kind of sure what was going on because you hadn't come back to the church yet, but you were, I guess, involved in people with some folks who do practice Hinduism, because it says that you lived with 4 individuals who were devout Hindus. And you were searching, because I think if I remember right, you said there was something stirring within you in your soul about Catholicism. So you went online and you started typing frantically on the computer, and you put in a request for something Catholic. And what you told me, or what you wrote to me, was nothing less than miraculous. So can you kind of give us a glimpse of what happened when you went online and you typed that in, and what happened next?
For sure. No, it's I'm laughing because it's just really miraculous. There's no other way to describe it. And to me, looking back, it's just funny now how serious the grace is. But what happened is I didn't even know a single Christian, not even Catholic, but Christian. I was living with 4 men, and 3 of them were Hindu. So there were Hindu gods all over the house. And just I had this negative experience one night. So I decided I really should try to seek help. Particularly, I was thinking of a Catholic priest. And so I Googled the word Catholic, like you said, and up pops the 54-day miraculous medal rosary novena. And I mean, I've tried that before. Since these last 10 years, never again has that rosary novena popped up. And when I Googled the word Catholic. So not only that, but I also had a miraculous medal. It was like the only Catholic relic I had on my person, right? It had been given to me by a priest. And I thought, well, I should do this. I dove into it. I didn't know what a novena was, nor did I realize that it was the longest in the church. But 54 days later, I was living in a house of Catholic women with 5 other Catholic girls, young professionals in the greater DC area. I was volunteering at a youth group at a local Catholic parish, friends with focused missionaries at a university. I was saying a daily rosary, going to daily mass. And that year, I ended up really reading the Bible cover to cover for the first time. And every day I attended adoration for 1 to 3 hours a day. Oh, and I also, even in that 54-day period of time, left my career in law, and I switched over to the nonprofit sector. I was working downtown DC. I switched over to become an educator and counselor for dual diagnostic persons with intellectual and behavioral disabilities.
A complete transformation.
Mm-hmm.
It shows the power of actual grace and gratuitous grace, and how God can use those things to lead you back to the sanctifying grace we need to get his divine life back within us. And that no matter how far you stray away, much like the prodigal son, no matter how far you stray away, God's always there waiting with his arms wide open for you to come back, because he does deeply desire for our salvation. And he is the good shepherd, and he will lay his life down for his sheep, and he will do anything to bring us back to the fold. And
2 months,
Yeah, and I mean that's a complete, that's not like that's a 180-degree turnaround. It's not even like it's not even like a progressive turnaround. It's like an immediate turnaround, and it just shows you that he definitely had a plan for you. It's much to my thought process, and what I know about biblical revelation. It's a lot like St. Paul. It's a moment on the road to Damascus where you just have this turnaround, and all of a sudden you become this messenger of the gospel, and you certainly have become that, and much more since then. And I'm thinking about this newfound freedom that you had found in that novena, and in the faith that you were raised in, that that was a comfort for you and never really left you, but you kind of decided to walk it, but you beginning this reversion process in your life. And when I think about your experience, the thing that stuck out to me the most was that you have this really unique understanding of something that a lot of cradle Catholics, at least the ones that I know in the culturally Catholic area that I'm in, and maybe even a lot of other non-Catholics that I have known and been friends with, they don't really grasp something that's really important about the Catholic faith. And it has to do with authority, and specifically the authority of someone who holds a divine office, like a bishop or a priest or a deacon, but specifically Catholic priests and bishops. Can you explain how the authority of the priesthood played a significant role in your reversion to the faith, and why it convicted you so much about the truth of the authority that Jesus Christ left to the apostles in the divine office that they hold and their successors.
Absolutely. I mean, um, the priesthood is what led me back, and I say that, and I've been saying that for a long time. But a few years later, after this really 2 month change, I was 25, and two Catholic priests led me through a Catholic 2 hour prayer where those demonic influences left my body. One of the priests ended up taking my case with its notes to the National Catholic Exorcist Conference that was held later that year in Pennsylvania. And at the conference, it was determined by exorcists that my case was a partial possession of a demonic legion for 13 years. And I did not start telling my testimony at the time because the years that followed, I suffered more difficulties. I ended up becoming groomed by a sexual predator in the Catholic Church, and I ended up having spiritual and psychological abuse within that relational dynamic, and then really just post-traumatic stress disorder and the struggles thereof from the trauma that had basically everything that had happened to me in my life up until that point. But I have to tell you that no matter what, I've practiced nearly so many religions and spiritualities, and I've even been spiritual and not religious. And I grew up Catholic, but obviously left. I returned to the Catholic Church no matter what, because it was the only location where the priesthood had that authority in the spiritual realm.
I'm thinking about, you said you were spiritual for a while and not religious. And I just want to point out that the first rebel in human history that's a created being is an immaterial being who was spiritual but chose not to be religious. And of course, that was the evil one. And he does have a large influence on folks. And praise God and praise Jesus Christ for the priesthood and for the Catholic Church and for the authority they have to do many things, administer sacraments, and to help bring people into a full encounter with Jesus Christ. You don't have to bring somebody 3,000 miles away to Judea to see Jesus anymore in a small town. You can bring them anywhere in the world in a Catholic Church, and they go meet a priest in the sacraments in persona Christi. They're going to have an encounter with Jesus Christ, and you're walking proof of that for sure. Your cross is heavy, the one that you are carrying. And when you have stressful things happen in your life, my wife and I have been through 5 brain operations with our child. I understand very well post-traumatic stress syndrome. I used to think maybe you had to be in a war zone or something to get PSD syndrome, but no, you can just have a really traumatic experience, and you can experience the repercussions of that. You had people along the way that helped you, and I always talk about this because we all have our own Simon of Cyrenes that help us carry our cross, whatever it is, the one that God lays on our shoulder. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, because of the suffering you've had, you've acquired a lot of wisdom, for your age. I find that when people suffer, they acquire a lot of wisdom about life. Can you talk a little bit about some of the wisdom you acquired from the suffering, and maybe talk about the individuals and the events that help you realize this cross has become one of the greatest gifts in your life instead of one of the greatest burdens?
Absolutely. I'll start with the Simons of Cyrene in my life. Really, I want to say that I think that light that was there throughout was Mary, the Mother of God, just kind of piercing the darkness and reminding me that she was protecting me, right? And then my immediate family, who's really been with me throughout the journey. Also, in the beginning, that first year, my Simons, they were the Catholic roommates I had and the Catholic focus students, those friends of mine at the local parish where we were part of the youth group. And then later on, the Catholic friends and missionaries who were with the priests during that 2-hour prayer. And of course, those 2 priests, right? God rest the soul of one of them. I would say, too, it's really just been all of the Catholic friends I've had over the years who've loved me, and then all friends and family members who have loved me and shown me God's love, essentially witnessed God's love to me when I couldn't believe in or love myself. So you asked what I've learned. I'd say my suffering has taught me a new form of love, and that's just to be present, right? To be in the moment with people. And ultimately, this life on earth, in my opinion, is about people. And during my isolation and post-trauma, even though I was in ministry, my heart thought that God was conditional and I had to prove my worth to God and to receive his love. And the reality is, First Corinthians, right? If I have not love, I'm nothing but a resounding gong. And to me, that's probably just someone who's really annoying. That was me all those years. And I realize that today. Today, I listen to people and I think, what does this person need to hear right now? And the answer is always the same. They need God's love. So I ask myself, how can I best be God's love to them at this moment? So I don't know. Life is a beautiful place, but it's a hard world to live in. And I know that my experience is maybe very unique or extreme, but the reality is that we all have a milieu of suffering in our lives. It's the reality of the cross. We can't get around suffering in this life. We all experience it in some form or fashion. And what I like is that Jesus, he really suffered such an extreme form of suffering to show us that he's here with us, right? He's saying to us, I'm in this with you. And what I like is he's telling me that my suffering is eternal paradise with me in heaven for you. And your suffering is hope and purpose, meaning, glory, right? And that's what I hold on to in this life. And that's what I hope to share with the world.
No, absolutely. And as I'm listening to you kind of witness to about the cross and how it's had a meaning in your life, and how God allows us to enter into that suffering, not because he needs us to unite ours to his, to add any merit to what he did, but so that when we go into that in our humanity, he already went into the depths of it within his, so we can experience everything that he did, so we can become more like him, be other Christ in the world. And I'm thinking of St. Paul. You mentioned him in his letter to the Corinthians. One of my favorite passages about suffering in the New Testament comes from the St. Paul's letter to the Colossians, where he says, "Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake. For in my flesh I complete what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ for the sake of his body, the church." And if our suffering has meaning in our life and has meaning in other people's lives, then we participate in both the redemption and the salvation of people when we enter into that moment with Christ at Calvary. And that's what I love about being Catholic. I love about that, about being, being able to go to the liturgy and to partake of the Eucharist, because I realize that no matter what I'm dealing with, if I unite my sufferings to Christ, they'll have eternal merit for me and for other people. And everybody suffers. We can't escape that in our life. So it's always good to have a witness, especially somebody who's been through as much as you have. And I know I kind of impromptu throw this at you, even though I've read a lot of your testimony, and I pick and chose some things that I wanted to hit on. Saint Teresa of Avila talks about the 3 stages of spiritual progression. And I know you wrote a little bit about this, and I hadn't included it originally, but I'm doing the Holy Spirit movement right now to ask you that. The first part is the purgative, right, where we're kind of facing our sin. And the next part is illuminative, where we become knowledgeable of the faith. And you certainly have a great knowledge of the faith. And then, of course, we're all working toward the unitive. And of course, that can start now on earth and continue on in heaven. You don't have to wait till you die. And the lives of the saints are a great exposition of that. But if you think about those 3 stages of your own spiritual development through everything you've been through, what was some of the key things from the purgative stage that you remember? Some of the things maybe that are key from the illuminative, and how are you striving to live in the unitive stage in your spirituality with God? What's some of the devotions you have in your daily life that help you move through those 3 stages of spiritual progression?
Okay. Well, a confession.
Sure.
So that's it. I go to confession every 3 days or once a week. So the reality is that unfortunately, those who have developed more of a pattern of vice in their life when they weren't in practicing the faith, like St. Augustine, right, or others, will then end up struggling more, because St. Thomas Aquinas explains how they have more of that gap to fill up towards virtue, if you will. And so I remain really close to the sacraments, Chad, and I mean really close, because there's no other way. Daily prayer, daily communication, Bible in the morning, just because I had other denominations, Christian denominations practiced, I really did like those, hour prayers set aside of just spiritual time with my journal and and book and Bible, and I can waste hours just sitting there and meditating with God, if you will, on the scriptures. And so the goal is the unitive stage, and I don't know if we ever really know if we're there or not, right? The church tells us later on, but uh, the goal is the unitive, and therefore that means we need to remain in the moment. Jesus said that today's worries are enough. And so many times I think the devil so we fight three things: the world, the flesh, and the devil. So those three things will try to get us focused on the future or worried about the past, and it keeps us from the moment. If we just focus on these 24 hours today, as Jesus asks, he'll take care of the rest. We're going to be okay.
No, that's beautiful. And I'm thinking about you speaking about one of the wisdoms you learned in your suffering was that you need to be present to people in the moment. And I know you know this. Anybody who's going through anything difficult knows this. When somebody truly just genuinely listens to you share your journey and they have an interest in hearing what you have to say, that's a God moment for them, because oftentimes they feel like they're alone. A lot of people don't understand what they're going through. And they don't have people that actually want to listen to them just share their journey. So listening and being present, to me, that's the greatest gift of someone being present to me in the moment, is they have taken an interest in my journey because they see a connection between my humanity and my suffering and their humanity and their suffering. And they want to enter into that with me. And then, of course, we can enter together into that, into Christ's suffering. Of course, it has an ultimate goal of helping other people. But, to me, that's the most striking thing. And then also I was thinking, do you have a daily devotion to the rosary? You mentioned Mary being a big player in your conversion. I'm a devout. I pray the rosary daily. Sometimes I pray it a couple times a day. I was just wondering if do you pray the rosary often, and what kind of role has the rosary played in your conversion and your ongoing journey?
Well, I am extremely close to Mary in particular. I will be honest, and the rosary is a harder prayer for me for whatever reason. However, I do consecrate myself to Mary every night before I go to bed, and I've consecrated myself to her frequently over the years with the 54-day Rosary Novena and St. Louis de Montfort's consecration. I'm very close to St. John Paul II and Mother Teresa, Maximilian Kolbe. I was born on the feast day of Maximilian Kolbe. And then Teresa of Avila, that's the first Catholic book I ever read, her Interior Castles, that year. And so Mary is the person who protects me and guides me in this life. And I recognize that she's my mother, and I don't worship her. I pray to her, and she brings me to Jesus.
Absolutely. I always think about Fulton Sheen when he said, Mary is a reflection of her son, pun intended. All of the light that that she has is a reflection of the light of her son, and it always points back to him. So, Mary played a big role in my conversion, and that's just a great way to show the universal nature of the church. Different types of spiritualities, different types of people have different spiritual devotions. So you're sharing some of those, and of course, I'm just sharing some of the ones that I have with the Blessed Mother. But I was curious because you mentioned her so much in your testimony, and that was a part of your journey.
Like Mary sitting at Jesus's feet soul. I just sit in adoration for a long time.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's the best. You remind me of not only Mary, his mother, but Martha and Mary, where he said, Martha, Martha, you're doing all the wrong things. Mary's chosen the better part, and it won't be taken away from her. So you're sitting at the feet of Jesus, and that's beautiful. You talked a little bit about the way you love and about that being part of the wisdom that you've acquired from your suffering. But could you describe how the cross and suffering has transformed, maybe even a little deeper way, your understanding of what real love is and how to share that love with other people?
Sure. So love is a choice. And I recognize that today's society, I don't know if we've forgotten that aspect of love, but it's not an emotion. And it's definitely not just like what I'm feeling in the moment. It's for sure a choice of our will. And so what I've learned is, number one, do we have a formed conscience? Do I have a formed conscience? Yes or no? What does that mean? Well, do I know right and wrong? okay, have I studied right and wrong? Do I know for affirmative that this is the right and this is the wrong? And therefore, can I yet make a right choice in this life in regard to whatever decision it is, whether it's a boyfriend, whether it's a new job or a move or what have you? And so I just try to like apply love and the reality that it's a choice of will into my daily life, because we're creators too, right? We're made in the image and likeness of God, and God created the universe. And so if we're made in his image and likeness, he's given us that gift too, that dignity where we can create in this life. And we were made for a reason. And so what is our purpose, our goal, our mission, our passion, right? So are we following the desires of our heart after we've formed our conscience? And that's the only way to discover what it is that we're here to do.
No, for sure. And real love is a decision. It's not a feeling. Lower forms of love are emotion based, and they can be elevated to the type of divine love you're speaking of. But we have to participate in Jesus's, passion, death, and resurrection through the sacraments and unite our love to his for him to elevate it into the kind of love that always wills, right? The person next to me, they're good for their good over our own. And I do think the world has deeply forgotten what real love is. Everything's an emotion today. Unfortunately, it's a triumph of feeling and emotion and the death of reason. And very well, I know you know very well that reason and the intellect are the highest faculty of the soul. And as I tell my 15-year-old son, if you don't control your passions, they will control you. And making the decision in the moment to will the person's good for their good over your own next to you is, in every moment, one step closer to the love of Christ or one step further away from it. So, in closing, is there anything that you could maybe share with us if somebody wanted to get in touch with you that's had some similar experiences and maybe wanted to reach out and talk with you about it, or to communicate with you online? Where do they go? I know you have a website, and I know that we kind of spoke briefly in the past. I mean, you got a big story to tell. You thinking about maybe writing a book?
So I've been trying to write a book for a long time, and I really have respected and just loved my friends who've been with me these 10 years and respected my silence until I was ready to tell my story. I had asked them because, there was a lot to go through, Chad, right? And so there was a lot of healing involved, a lot of being in front of Jesus in the sacraments and just forms of healing. And I needed to be able to get to a place where I could tell my story, but in a way that it was Christocentric, that it pointed to the good, because really there's nothing to fear here. There really, truly, I tell you, is nothing to fear. I think that's what St. Paul says too. And Jesus, what's the thing that he quotes the most in the Bible, right?
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid. Be not afraid. Honestly, I'm telling you, there's nothing to fear. We really have nothing to fear. Be not afraid in this life. And I know it's hard. It is hard because there's so many things that we struggle with just on a day-to-day basis. Be not afraid. If you do want to get in touch with, or if anybody does, I do have a website. It's super low key. I finally have the creativity. Thank you for the initiative in this podcast, because I finally now feel the creativity pouring through into a book. I've been writing it, so I'm on the 3rd chapter. So I will have a book forthcoming, and I'm hoping to make my website look a little bit better. It's really old school, but my email is on it. If you want to get in touch with me and you have any particular questions, I've obviously done a lot of research, both on spirituality, good, evil, and then I've been counseled and just in education on how to educate on these topics by Catholic priests, by other exorcists. And but that aside too, I have studied psychology to really the fullest, and have dialogued with a lot of my friends who are Christian counselors, and just understand all of the dynamics of the person, mind, body, soul, and can point into people to the directions that they might need to go. So if anybody does want to reach out, feel free. And if anybody wants to hear more of my story, I'll have a book forthcoming. So just send me your email.
I can certainly distribute that information. Do you have a title working?
I don't want to tell you what the title is, because somebody told me that if you tell, like Hemingway or something, if you tell people what it is that's going to be in the book, then the creativity's lost. So I'm trusting him. I don't believe him, but I'm trusting him, and I'll try it out.
It's no big deal. I just wanted to give you an opportunity. If you had like a working title, maybe you could throw out there for
Yeah, I do. Sorry, everyone. We'll
No,
just
it's okay. No, it's been awesome to get to know you and to work with you professionally. I've enjoyed. We've presented together a couple times to different groups of people, at least in my diocese, and we had an opportunity to do one in Baton Rouge if COVID wouldn't have set in and kind of changed that. But hopefully, when we come back, you're going to be coming to my diocese again at some point to present some incredible Catholic stuff to the priests, and I'm really excited about doing that because I believe that the future of evangelization and catechesis is wrapped up in not only knowing the faith well and being able to share it, but also being able to give and pull people in from that have different points of view about things that they don't understand about the faith. You know, the immortality of the soul. Did Jesus really exist? You know, he made a claim nobody else ever made, and you're an apologist too, so you should go out there and share the faith. And it's been really great having you today on the show, and I want to thank you for your humility and your vulnerability in sharing your suffering and how you've allowed Christ to work in it, not only for your own benefit, but now as you go out and share it for the benefit of others. If you're interested in speaking with Ashley directly or want to check her writing, visit her website. It's hopeandlove.org, or visit her social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I do have those posted on my my website with the rest of the information from the podcast. So if you enjoyed it today, share it, give it a rating, leave a comment. And if you'd like to invite me to speak at an event, pick up a copy of my books, shoot me a message on social media, go to my website, chadjadis.com. Remember, all proceeds from my writing and speaking go to fund Eli's lifelong medical expenses. And remember, we must boast most gladly in our weaknesses, so that the strength of Christ might be with us. For when we're weak, that's when we're really strong. Because it takes a Good Friday to leave behind who the world says we should be in order to rise with Jesus Christ on Easter Sunday as the person he created us to be, a saint. Until next time, God love you.
In a world that says give up, I did not yield. I gave my all for your battlefield.